How's it going, guys? Owen here for Gaming Spotlight, the new show from Tech Radar, where we check out some of the hottest gaming news and tech. Has Amazon got a console planned? A few months ago, we heard the company was working on an Android-powered system, and it now sounds like this is not only on the cards, but that Amazon could be preparing for a 2014 release and a price to undercut both the PS4 and Xbox One. But should the failure of the Ouya be cause for concern? And most of all, do we even want an Android-powered console? We got our very own Patrick Goss and Hugh Langley on the sofa to talk about Amazon's plans and prospects.
I know you're probably more of a fan of this than I am. I mean, we've got PS4, we've got Xbox One, we've got developers having to already code for 2 platforms. Does that mean that the big studios aren't really going to look at this and say, oh yeah, I want to work for an Amazon console as well? I mean, is this just going to be Android games upscaled to your television? Is that going to work?
Well, this is my point. I don't think it will work because I think Ouya and others have shown that actually gamers, they want to play their Android games on their phone. They don't really want to play it on the TV. But, I mean, they've already got Double Helix. I mean, potentially, I think they could lure other developers over as well. It might not be as powerful as the Xbox One and PS4, but is that going to matter if this is more of a multimedia device with a big gaming aspect?
I think it is going to matter, isn't it? Or else we'd all still be on our Amigas and our Atari STs.
But
saying,
if it's
well,
more,
who needs graphics?
Yeah, but if it's more affordable, I mean, if they're offering something that's potentially half the price of a PS4 and Xbox One, but with a huge library of games, and we've got to remember that Amazon...
A huge library of relatively lo-fi games, though, not a huge library of great games.
Yeah, but potentially more. I mean, if they can get the ball rolling, I mean, they've got Double Helix. I mean, we don't know who else they're eyeing up at the moment. The thing to remember as well is that Amazon is, obviously, it's a big name. It's an established name as it is, and it's got the cloud, and it's got a big website where it can advertise its games quite easily. So it is, I don't think it'll be too difficult for it to sort of lure bigger names over in the future.
I mean, they've got all the Love Film stroke Amazon Film stuff
yeah,
as well,
exactly.
so it's quite a powerful multimedia tool, isn't it? Whereas maybe Microsoft and Sony are having to come at it from a games perspective. Maybe it can come sort of sneak in a media thing. It's sort of an addition to the media box.
Yeah, well, to be honest, I think it's similar to what Apple might be planning at the moment with Apple TV. I think there it's sort of got a Trojan horse in the living room already, which could eventually just turn into a game console overnight. Controllers in our pockets, it's our iPhone, it's our iPad.
I would say of all of them, Apple, I mean, if you were a developer and Apple came in and did their own game console, albeit, you know, one that built on the App Store maybe, or just ramped stuff up, as we were talking about Amazon, that's pretty powerful. I mean, there is a lot of iDevices across the world. You've got an immediate big group that you could target. Apple behind you, you know that Apple will showcase your game in one of those big glitzy announcements that they do. You know, I think that's going to be pretty attractive. I think if Apple came in and said, we're going to do gaming in a big way, I mean, that is a big deal.
Other interesting news of the week is more on Sony's potential Oculus Rift rival. You know, Oculus Rift said they're not interested in consoles, they're focusing on PCs, potentially mobile. So who's going to come and do the consoles? And it sounds like Sony is building something for the PS4.
Well, they've been hinting about it for quite a while, haven't they? I mean, it's newer news, but they've been hinting about a potential gaming headset for quite some time. And they've obviously got these big headsets out there that are already picking up a little bit of momentum. I'm not sure how many they've actually sold because they're pretty expensive. But I mean, it's such a cool idea, isn't it? It's one of those things in gaming. I mean, the moment we saw an Oculus Rift, a lot of us were going, yeah, that makes sense.
One of the rumours we're hearing is that actually Sony's is, from people who've apparently used it, is comparable to Valve's headset. Now, Valve's one is just a prototype, not meant for market. Basically mean they could just throw as much money at it as they wanted to. But if Sony's got something that's comparable to that, which can be sold on market for a reasonable price, that to me is kind of bad news for Oculus Rift almost, do you think? I don't know, do you feel like we're getting to this point now where Oculus Rift is taking too much time and we're actually going to see a lot more competitors come out, and actually Oculus Rift might not be king of VR for too long?
I've got to admit, I'm really excited about all of the virtual reality stuff, and when a big name like Sony gets involved, it can only be a good thing. I think Oculus Rift obviously has had a lot of hype for a long time. Sometimes the problem with that is unless you release in the right kind of frame, you sort of hit this limbo period where people's excitement begins to wane. But when someone like Sony comes along and says, we're doing a virtual reality headset as well, I mean, they're not overtly stated that, but it's looking more and more likely. I think everyone starts getting a bit more excited about it. You know, will all those PS4 users now pull themselves out of the contention for buying an Oculus Rift when it arrives because they'll be waiting for the Sony version that plays with their machine they've already been out and spent a few £100s on?
The other thing is as well, like, what kind of games are we going to see with Oculus Rift? Right now, first-person shooters seem obvious. I'd love to go back and play Fallout New Vegas and Borderlands with Oculus Rift support. Another one as well is space simulators. Now, the exciting thing this week is that Valkyrie has been announced as the first launch title for Oculus Rift. It's exciting for two reasons. Mainly, because Oculus Rift now has a game, but it also kind of suggests that Oculus is probably putting a date in the diary for a release because, if there's going to be a launch title with Eve, they're going to come out together. So to me, that's really exciting. And I've not tried Valkyrie, but I have tried Strike Suit Zero, and that was an immense experience. Like, sitting in the cockpit, looking around, I had my virtual legs, it was a little bit weird, but, just having that experience of being in space was phenomenal.
Were your virtual legs longer than your actual legs?
They looked really weird. They were really thin, and I felt kind of odd for a bit. But the good thing was that actually, as far as my brain could tell, I was in space, in a spaceship, so I didn't feel nauseous. Whilst with like the Unity demo and a few others, when I was walking around using the keyboard, my brain was like, okay, I'm looking around, I'm in the room, but my legs aren't moving. What the hell's going on? Start to feel a bit queasy.
So you've had the PS Vita, you did the review for Tech Radar. Obviously it's been in the wild for quite some time now, but just coming to the UK and other markets, and quite interesting. But it strikes me that having seen the old Vita, the new Vita, it almost feels like a step down in terms of the quality of the build and the materials and things like that. And I remember the original PSP. The first one was, it was a heavy piece of kit, but it felt like it was a proper piece of technology. And then the next iterations they just felt a little bit more lighter, a little bit more plasticky. Is that the case with the PS Vita?
Yeah, my initial fears with the Vita Slim was the step down for OLED display sent alarm bells ringing for me. But actually, having tried it, it does look as good. And it's different coming from the old Vita. You're going to notice it more. But for someone who hasn't tried the Vita before, it looks crisp and clear. And the build quality, I actually prefer it. The Vita was a bit heavy for me. In fact, we've actually got a review of the PS Vita Slim right now.
Thanks guys. Yes, so as you just heard, there's a new Vita in town. Sony's original model didn't arrive to quite the fanfare it was hoping for, and overall sales were a bit disappointing. Now that the PS4 is here and pushing the possibilities for next-gen remote play though, Sony is breathing new life into the Vita in the hope that it can find traction amongst PS4 gamers. So what's new? Well, first of all, as you've probably guessed, it's smaller than the original. It's around 20% slimmer and 42 grams lighter, and this is immediately noticeable when you pick it up for the first time. It's cheaper too, although at £180, it's still asking for more than its rivals. Elsewhere in design, the differences between the original Vita and the Slim are subtle, although if you put the two next to each other, you'll start seeing just how much Sony has changed. The screen is where the biggest alteration has been made. The original model came with an OLED display, but this made things costly for Sony, so the new Vita has been bumped down to LCD. This also allows for the slimmer form factor. Pixel density is still 220 ppi though, so sharpness isn't really affected. Colour is a different matter though, and things look much more washed out on the Vita Slim. On the plus side, LCD is less power hungry than OLED, so battery goes further than the original, around 2 hours further in fact. There are other aesthetic differences too, such as redesigned buttons, smaller camera lens, a different speaker grille and a slightly smaller rear touchpad. The glass-clad front is gone too, and there's a distinctly less slick border around the screen on the Slim. You'll also find a micro USB port on the bottom to replace the original's proprietary port, which is a welcome change. Inside, things remain identical with a quad-core Cortex-A9 and 512MB RAM, although the Slim also gets 1GB of flash storage built in. So is it worth your cash? Well, if you've already got an original Vita, there's not enough going on here to warrant buying a Slim. Other than that though, apart from the price and lower quality LCD screen, the new model does bring some welcome improvements, even if most are aesthetic. If you're tempted by the prospect of PS4 Remote Play and are planning to grab Sony's latest console, the Vita Slim is definitely worth a look. That said, you might want to hold off a little while longer, as PS4 Vita bundles are in the works.
So that's it for the first ever Gaming Spotlight.
And if you liked it, make sure you leave your comments below, and for all the latest tech news and reviews, make sure you subscribe to techradar.com. This guy.